This is the minimum amount of money you need to live on dividends, and it's a lot less than you might have imagined. But first, I have to tell you something. There is much information on the internet about how to live on dividends. I've seen hundreds of videos, articles, and reels discussing it. Unfortunately, most sources overlook important factors like inflation and each individual's cost of living. That's why I spent so many hours condensing all this information into simple to understand terms. This video is probably the only one you will ever need to learn how to live off your dividends. So take note and pay attention, because I will explain how much money you should invest to avoid returning to work. Step 1. Determine how much money you need per month. The first step in living on dividends is determining how much money you need to live monthly. Most people have very different lifestyles. Having 3 kids and a dog differs from living alone or with your mother. If you're a homeowner, you will logically spend less money than if you have to pay rent. The cost of living can vary greatly depending on your city or country. For example, prices in Latin America or India are much lower than in the United States. That's why so many first world professionals save to spend their final years in a third world country where the cost of living is low. This doesn't mean that you should abandon your home to live off your investments. But if you live in a place as expensive as New York, you will probably need more money than most people watching this video to reach your goals. Now that you know the main factors that could affect how much money you'll need to spend the rest of your life without returning to work, it's time to do some calculations. Let's start by calculating how much money you spend month to month. If you haven't already done so, open an Excel spreadsheet and create 2 columns. Use one for your fixed expenses and the other to record your variable expenses, like when you crave a McDonald's or a taco. Review your expenses for the last 6 months to get a general idea of how much money you need to live regularly, including any exceptional expenses you've had recently. Remember, it's not just enough to be able to cover your rent. You have to be prepared for everything. The next step is to add inflation to our formula. But what's inflation? Here's a simple explanation. Step 2. Include inflation in your formula. Inflation is the general increase in the prices of goods and services over a given period. It decreases the value of money and forces people to earn more to maintain their lifestyle. For reference, the average US inflation rate was 4.1% in 2023, compared to 8.0% in 2022. If we assume that inflation will remain between 5% and 10% over the next few decades, it would mean that you would need to earn 5% to 10% more each year to maintain your standard of living. In other words, if you currently spend $5,000 a month, you might need $5,250 or even $5,500 to pay your expenses for the next year. This is assuming there is no economic crisis that causes hyperinflation. In countries like Argentina, inflation is much more difficult to calculate, so you must be constantly aware of what is happening around you, especially during election time. If you live in a country with an unstable economy, you must invest in assets backed by a safer currency, like the pound sterling, the euro, or the dollar. With that said, let's see what kind of stocks could help you reach your financial goals. Step 3. Find assets that fit your risk and capital profile. There are thousands of ways you can generate passive income. For example, you could start a blog and promote products sold on Amazon. However, creating a blog or starting a business takes time and effort. Fortunately, we can get the same results using the power of information to our advantage. Dividend-paying stocks allow us to generate money month after month without doing anything. This is probably the best way to make passive money, as it doesn't require you to build a business from scratch. Investing in the stock market involves some risks. That's why smart investors diversify their portfolios. Let's say you decide to invest in the oil industry. If oil demand plummeted, your stock portfolio would take a hit. However, it is highly unlikely that your portfolio would suffer large losses if you had invested in all existing energy sources, as one would outperform the others. You can reduce your risks even further by investing in different industries. That's why most YouTubers tell you about the S&P 500, a stock market index comprised of the 500 largest companies in the United States. The S&P 500 has returned 10.2% annually since 1926, far outperforming savings accounts. In fact, if you invest $500 a month, you could earn $1 million 29 years from now. This is the only amount you need to achieve financial freedom. Unfortunately, we can't rely on the S&P 500 because you could only reach $1 million if you repeatedly reinvest your interest. This would not allow you to withdraw your earnings, so we must focus on companies that share their profits with their shareholders. Step 4. Invest in dividend kings. Companies that pay dividends are usually more profitable and consolidated than their competitors. However, there is an elite group among them that is as solid and reliable as the S&P 500. We're talking about companies that survived multiple recessions and have paid dividends for at least 50 years. These companies are called dividend kings. Many are part of the S&P 500 and have a market capitalization of at least $3 billion, like 3M, Coca-Cola, and Johnson & Johnson. But there's a problem. The dividends these companies pay tend to adjust over time, which could affect our calculations. So let's pretend for a second that both interest rates and inflation are stable over time. If you need $5,000 a month to live on, you should have $1 million invested in stocks of companies that will pay 6% a year in dividends. On the other hand, you could generate $4,000 a month by investing $800,000 in companies that pay at least 6%. If you're willing to adjust your expenses to $3,000 a month, you only need to have $600,000 invested. But since I'm assuming most of you don't have $1 million in your bank accounts, I've devised an alternative solution that might work. I just hope that you are willing to travel. Let's use a more pessimistic formula and assume that we found a company that will pay us 5% per year in dividends. Since our goal is to live with the least amount of money possible invested, I found some countries where the cost of living was less than $1,000 per month, such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Tunisia, Sri Lanka, Algeria, and Syria. These countries have a living cost of between $350 and $500, so you only need to make $6,000 a year to live in one of them. You can earn $6,000 annually by investing $120,000 in stocks with a 5% annual dividend. This is probably the minimum amount of money you will need to live on your dividends. Yet, I'll leave a link in the description so you can do your own calculations. If you plan to reach this goal with less than $120,000, you should consider getting a second job to start saving. But believe it or not, there is another way to save $120,000 by earning minimum wage. And I'm going to show you step by step how to do it. So be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell to find out when I post this video. That said, I'll see you next time.